That's primarily the reason why that, and I am a lifelong Southwest Missourian. I was born and raised in Carthage in the Diamond area, Granby. Grew up on 1,200 acres of cattle farm between my dad, my uncle, and my granddad. So, a horse and a .22 rifle, and I was good to go for the day. I know the values of Southwest Missouri. I love Southwest Missouri. When my wife and I both graduated college from Springfield, this was a good move for us because moving to Springfield, there was at a college pumping out our degrees all the time. So the further we got away from Springfield, the better life we could make for ourselves. And she was from Nevada, so here we are. I like this area. It was an easy stay for me. So I just, representing your values is second nature to me because they're my values. So that being said, I was born into a Christian family. I was born into a Republican family. Now, most of you know, just because you're born into a Christian family doesn't mean you're a Christian. So at the young, tender age of 12 years old, I made that decision and turned my life over to Jesus Christ, as I'm sure many of you have done as well. The Republican thing, I don't think that took as long. I got to know my great-granddad. I was one of the fortunate ones. He was 93, I was 13 when he passed away. And I got to talk to him quite a bit because when you're in your 80s and everybody's out of the house except this guy, and he's all you have to talk to, you get a talking to. So we'd play checkers, and I'd listen to the Republican platform a lot. Learned to appreciate it, good work ethic, take care of those who can't take care of themselves, help people out. So those were the types of things I grew up listening to. I also had a granddad that was an MP in the Army. When he was discharged from World War II, became a police officer, was retired as a chief of police. My dad and my uncle were both security police in the Air Force. I had two uncles that served valiantly in the jungles of Vietnam as U.S. Marines. So these were the men that I grew up around, and these were the men that had influences on my lives. I never once saw any one of these men pick a fight. I didn't, but I never saw them cower from a fight either once the fight had been picked. So as far as I'm concerned, on the state of Missouri, the fight's already been picked, and now we've got to get somebody up there that's not afraid to fight. I've told a couple of people this, and it may not be very, very polite or anything, but personally what I think we need in Jefferson City is an SOB that's not afraid to say no, and I'm him. They're taking too much of our money, and they want to keep taking more. They don't allot our money correctly in the way I see it. They keep spending it on frivolities and things that are nonsense, and then they turn right back around and ask us for more. Now, it's bad enough that the federal government's doing it, but when our state government starts doing it, I've had enough, and I think both of you have as well. I did have one thing written down that I wanted to share. It sounds a little bit conceited, but it kind of sums up the reason I think most of us should want to run for this office. Not just me. I think everybody in here should want to do this if they have the desire and the wherewithal to do it. It was from John Stuart Mills, and I'm sure you've heard the quote before, the best way for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. So I took that kind of to heart. That's always been kind of something I thought really kind of described how we all should be. So those things being said, I think we'll get down to some policy issues. My core beliefs, and you'll see them listed there on the back of the card that I have out there. Pro-life. I'm not check marking that box with a pencil that you can use an eraser on. That's checked with a permanent marker. Life begins at conception, and it's a human life. And as far as I'm concerned, there's no pro-choice and pro-life. It's pro-life or anti-life. And that's the only option there is. So if that offends you, you'll just have to be offended. The Second Amendment of the Constitution of the United States guarantees that I have the right to bear arms. It didn't say anywhere in there, and I read it last night, it didn't say anything about I have the right to bear arms or you have the right to bear arms according to Joe Biden. It didn't say we have the right to bear arms according to the Supreme Court. I don't think it said anywhere in there that it said you have the right to bear arms and then a check mark for somebody else. It said we had the right to bear arms, period. The only restrictions I would put on that would be for people that just are challenged enough that they don't need to have something like that in their possession, or violent criminals for sure. When we get down past that, I think the overreach of the federal government, speaking about those things, if you get into the 10th Amendment, it clearly states that the states are sovereign and they can govern themselves. And the only thing that restricts those governances is Article 1, Section 8. And if I counted right, there were 18 pieces to Section 8 that specifically spelled out what the federal government has control of. They can make treaties, or that's the president, but they can borrow money, they can coin money, they can print money. There were several things in there, and it makes sense. And then what's left over belongs to the states. The best way I think I could sum that up is when you were a kid and your parents, they picked the house you lived in, they picked the car you went on vacation in, they probably picked what you had for dinner. But you got to pick what poster you hung in your room. You got to pick how you tied your shoes. They didn't come in there and do those things, so that's kind of a rudimentary way to put that. But there are certain things that you're allowed to do that the big guy doesn't have charge of. And we need to start taking those things back. We are a sovereign state along with 49 other states. And that includes California and New York. They just aren't smart enough in some of those governments out there to figure out they have those rights. When we come down to local issues as far as states and having their rights, I'm not for eminent domain for any other reason other than the betterment for all. So when we start talking about eminent domain and we talk about things, property rights, where someone other than a utility or the railroads they're not going to build anymore. We're not worried about them. But utilities and things of that nature, I can get along with that. But for some of these places that are coming in with their shopping malls and other things, you know what I'm talking about, and they want to condemn the property, take it from the property owner. They don't do anything with it for 10 or 12, 15 years, and then they turn around and sell it for a profit. No, our property rights are our property rights, and that's just the way it stands. Let's get into the federal government wanting federal waterways. So some of you people are in agriculture in here. I have 2 degrees in agriculture, so if you don't think I love agriculture, you're wrong. But when the federal government says that Joe Smith's farm over here has an irrigation ditch, and occasionally it fills up with 2 inches of rain at the bottom of it, we want to consider that a federal waterway. Well, that drains into his neighbor's irrigation lake. That's a federal waterway, and we want control of that. So they want to tell us how much fertilizer we can use, how much pesticides we can use on those. Those aren't waterways for commerce. We don't need them to tell us what waterways are. I've been fishing. I know what a waterway looks like. I've seen ships go up and down the Mississippi River. We've been to the coast. I've seen barges pull in. I know what a waterway looks like, and it's not John's 2 inches of water in his irrigation ditch. We need to tell the federal government to take a hike, and we need somebody who will support legislation to tell the federal government to take a hike, just like our SAPA legislation that they're debating today. They're scared of it. They're scared of it because, by God, Missouri has taken back what's rightfully ours. And we need to be sure that they don't take our land and tell us or tell our farmers how much fertilizer and pesticides they can use. And I'm going to dispel a myth right now. Farmers are not the problem when it comes to pesticides and fertilizers on our land. If you know a farmer, you'll know that he will not over-fertilize. He will not use more chemical than he needs to use because it cuts into his bottom line. And most of these farmers are living on a bottom line that's razor thin anyway. It makes a weekend in Las Vegas on a crap table look like a nice annual income. So what we need to do is tell the federal government, butt out of our waterways. They're not waterways, they're ditches and ponds.